Welcome, friends. It's nighttime here, but unfortunately, the Josh Duggar story and scandal still isn't over. And as many of you know, I'm on a quest to understand as much as I can about what happened to Josh and his sisters, who was involved in covering it up, and what role did the IBLP play in all of this. So, here we are. Recently, the Duggar sisters, specifically Jill, Jessa, and Ginger, filed a lawsuit against Springdale about the release of their identities as victims of Josh Duggar. Legal documents and depositions were just released from the court, and shockingly, Kaylee Holt, the daughter of Jim and Bobby Holt, Josh Duggar's allegedly betrothed girlfriend, was deposed in the suit against Springdale. Many others were also deposed, and the documents confirm much information about the Duggar family and what happened many years ago. Tonight, I'm going to share with you Kaylee Holt's deposition. Continue to tune in because I hope to do additional videos on the other depositions as well. The Holt family is a fundamentalist Christian family who were close with the Duggar family in the late 90s and early 2000s. Jim Holt is a former member of the Arkansas House of Representatives and the State Senate. Jim Bob and Josh Duggar were active in Jim Holt's campaigns and political career. This past December, the matriarch of the Holt family testified against Josh Duggar at his CP trial. You can find all the information you need about her testimony if you check out my other video about the Holts. When the Holt's daughter Kaylee was 14 years old, Josh Duggar and Kaylee, quote-unquote, dated with a purpose, as Bobby Holt would later call it during Josh's trial. Kaylee appeared on the Duggars' very early TLC special, 16 Kids and Moving In. After Kaylee's mother testified in December, Kaylee took to Instagram to say this: "I try to keep parts of my past more private and just talk about my life now. But I feel like what's been happening in the last week or so has kind of forced me to say things and talk about it. Many of you who are on here know that my family grew up with the Duggars and we were inseparable at one point. Many of you know about my past relationship, and that didn't really get talked about. It was kept quiet for most of my life until recently." On the stand, Bobby Holt testified that she hoped her daughter and Josh were going to get married, but the parents decided to call off the courtship after learning about Josh's issues with his sisters. Kaylee stated that although she hoped not to discuss her past, she understands why her mother had to bring it up in court. Kaylee said, "Obviously, when you're under oath, you need to tell the truth. So when my mom was asked how she came to know the information she was witnessing about, she had to tell the truth. That kind of brought to light my past. Not that I'm trying to hide it. My closest friends know, but I didn't really want it broadcasted everywhere. But it's kind of been happening without me really pursuing that. So I have felt like I have to talk about it, which is okay. I'm not ashamed of it." Kaylee and Josh, who were born 2 days apart, dated long before Josh became interested in his now wife, Anna. On Instagram, Kaylee said, "I did want to address what I want to do moving forward with my Instagram account. There are a lot of people here following me because of my relations to the Duggars, and they know we were really good friends growing up. I have taken about a week to really think about what I want to do here. I don't know how to go about keeping my privacy at the same time. I am going to keep a lot of my life private. I am going to keep my children's lives private, and I am attempting to not really go too much in depth about my thoughts. Now I feel like I have to be more careful about what I say and more discreet to keep my family's privacy." I really feel for Kaylee, and I'm only going to show you a few older pictures of her here in my video. But unfortunately, she was called and deposed in Jill and Jessa's recent court battle, and I need to bring the information about what she said to the table so that we can continue to work with as much knowledge as possible of the truth about what happened with Josh Duggar. This deposition is long, so I will be skipping certain parts of it that I don't feel are essential. I may also make a second video, considering the length. Kaylee Holt's deposition in the Jill Dillard versus the City of Springdale was videotaped and given via Zoom. In the very beginning, the lawyer asked Kaylee questions about her being subpoenaed for this. She confirms that she was subpoenaed. They talk a little bit about her lawyer and her husband being present, and then I'm going to skip over that and go on to when they start asking some questions. Lawyer: I wanted to ask you, Ms. Tull, have you done anything else to prepare for the deposition today? Kaylee: What do you mean by prepare? Lawyer: Have you read anything to refresh your memory about anything, or have you spoken to anyone to help you remember? Kaylee: I did go through some of my old journals because I was journaling at the time, but not very much. I just barely glanced at it for a date reference. Lawyer: It's funny that you said at the time, and so I was going to say, so when you say at the time, I think you mean at the time you learned about the incident in the Duggar family. Around that time? Kaylee: Yes. Lawyer: Okay, besides reviewing your journals, have you had a chance to speak with anybody about the incident from that time? Kaylee: I spoke to my parents, mostly because they had my journals, and I needed to get that from them so that it was in my possession before this call. Lawyer: Anybody else besides your folks that you've had a chance to talk about anything prior to your deposition? Kaylee: I'm trying to think. I know my husband and I talked a little bit, mostly just trying to refresh my memory, prepare for questions, and emotionally prepare for things that I may not be aware that are still painful. But we did. We did mostly just say we probably shouldn't speak about this with anybody but our attorney, just to keep things safe. So we let people know. We let two of our friends know who are married to pray for us that this deposition was coming up. But I don't think we actually discussed any details about that time with them, but we did mention that we had it coming and that they would pray for us. Lawyer: May I assume that these married friends were not people who were involved in the incident and just people you are in touch with now? Kaylee: That is correct. Lawyer: And this of course involves the Duggar family. Let's just say in the last month, even prior to getting the subpoena for us talking, did you have the occasion to speak to anyone in the Duggar family? And I mean the Duggars and the plaintiffs who were formally named Duggar: Jill, Jessa, Joy, and Ginger. Kaylee: Do you mean when I got the subpoena? Lawyer: No, just in the last month or so, like September or August. Kaylee: It has been recently, but I don't remember if it's been in September or not. Lawyer: Which of the sisters are you closer to? Kaylee: I'm still in contact with Jessa and Jill. Lawyer: Okay. And have you had the occasion to talk to Jessa or Jill about this deposition process? Kaylee: No, we thought it best not to speak with them about it. Lawyer: So I'm going to try to move as quickly as I can because I know you are busy there at home. Going back to when you were younger, how did you get to know the Duggar family? Kaylee: Our dads, Jim Bob and my father, Jim Holt, were best friends growing up. They have known each other since they were 12, and I grew up with them myself. Lawyer: Did you have the occasion to visit their home and vice versa? Did they visit you all's home? Kaylee: Correct. They did, and vice versa. Lawyer: Okay, so this would be since you were a young child, is that correct? Kaylee: That's correct. Kaylee: I'm the oldest. I'm firstborn. Lawyer: Okay, and I believe is the oldest of the Duggar's children Jana? Kaylee: The older is Joshua. Lawyer: Joshua? Oh, Josh, forgive me. And then it's Jana and her twin after that? Kaylee: That's correct. I'm going to skip a little bit here because they're talking about the ages of the kids. And then the lawyer goes on to say, would it be accurate to assume that of your brothers and sisters and the Duggar's brothers and sisters, several of the kids are sort of the same age or around the same age? Kaylee: Yes, that is safe to assume. Lawyer: Okay, so as you were growing up, did your family attend church with the Duggar family? Kaylee: Church, as in we got together to worship the Lord, yes. We didn't actually go to a building that had a pastor that was an official denomination or congregation that was under a pastor. We did not go to church with them in that context, but we did call it church, what we did, which was to go to their home or them to our home and other families that we knew, and we would talk about the Lord and pray and sing and attempt to have church. Lawyer, currently, when you and your husband and your family attend church, do you attend church in more like in a building with the pastor and with an organized congregation? Kaylee, yes, sir. Lawyer, and back then when you were having those, would it be accurate to call them services or fellowship? Kaylee, gatherings. Lawyer, gatherings. Okay. Was your family, the Holt family, also going to a more conventional church, a church with a pastor and a congregation, or was that just the worship that y'all had? Kaylee, we were not attending another church at that time. Lawyer, do you recall the Bates going to services, gatherings with y'all? Kaylee, not at the time that I was there. Lawyer, okay, so that was after you were there? Kaylee, we knew the Bates, but we did not attend the same church with them because they lived in a different state. So then they go on to talk about the different families that were at the church, and Kaylee names the Butcher family, the Baker family, the Nichols family, the Millsap family, the Andrig family, and the Fedowskis, which we've talked about before on this channel. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit more here and go right into some questions about Josh. Lawyer. So honing in on a time that we can mark, I'd like to talk to you about the time that you learned, if you did learn, that there had been an incident in the Duggar family where Josh, the oldest, had SM'd his sisters and possibly others. Do you recall becoming aware of that? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay, and do you recall about when that was? Kaylee, I know. It was March 30th of 2003. Lawyer, what was the occasion that you would have learned this information? Kaylee, that's a hard answer. I was in a romantic relationship with Josh at that time, and my parents told me what had happened because an incident had happened again. So my parents became aware, and then they told me because they felt it was best that the relationship should end for the time being because of what was going on in their family. Lawyer, may I say first, Miss Holt, I take absolutely no pleasure in talking about things that are difficult, and I will do so as quickly and efficiently as we can. But I want you to know that if you want to take a break anytime, I hope you will just say, hey, can I take a break? And then Kaylee says, I will, thank you. The lawyer says, yes, ma'am. So it's interesting that you said it had happened again. So this makes me think that it happened before. Maybe it had stopped and it happened again. Is that your understanding? Kaylee, that was my understanding, yes. Lawyer, and my understanding is that you can tell me if I'm wrong, that when you were in a relationship with Josh, that would be, do you call it courting? Kaylee, courting, she asks as a question. Lawyer, yes. Kaylee, well, at the time, we called it betrothal. Lawyer, okay. Kaylee, but yes, technically. Lawyer, all right. And then my understanding is that the betrothal would be approved by both Josh's father and your father. Is that? And Kaylee breaks in and says, and our mothers. The lawyer says, and your mothers. Okay, fair enough. And on March 30th, when you were told, did it go on hiatus? Did it stop? Kaylee, I believe at the time they thought that it was over, but with potential to work things out in the future. So kind of maybe on hold is how you would say that. Lawyer, okay, did it ever get restarted again, the betrothal? Kaylee, no. Lawyer, did your parents take that occasion to discuss with you sort of what happened and what had happened in the Duggar family? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, do you know if they discussed those things with any of your brothers and sisters as well? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay. And did they talk about safety and being safe in situations to avoid if that ever happened to any of you? Kaylee, yes, they did. Lawyer, okay, do you recall any of the sort of admonishments or advice or sort of instructions they gave you all to avoid a situation like that? Kaylee, yes. I feel like it had been kind of a very open conversation with our family after that happened. We talked about accountability, so having open communication with people that we trust if an incident ever felt, if we ever felt, first of all, threatened or we were violated. And then to go to someone that we trusted and talk about it, because that would be a safe place. And then if we ever saw anything with someone else, to talk about it so that they would be in a safer place also. Lawyer, and did you have a perception of how that situation was handled in the Duggar family? Kaylee, did I have a perception of how what was handled? Lawyer, did you know what they had done within the family to handle their situation? Kaylee, I don't know exactly how they talked to their children about it, but I do know that some steps they took to deal with it. Lawyer, and what are those that you remember? Kaylee, my dad was a chaplain at a juvenile offender facility prior to this happening, and my dad heavily encouraged Jim Bob and Josh to turn themselves into the police, and he eventually persuaded them. And they went on April 9th, 2003 to a police officer to confess what he had done, so I know they took that measure. They also sent Josh out of the home from probably March 31st because I think they left the next day after I found out. So around March 31st, 2003 to July 18th of 2003, so a few months. Lawyer, do you know to whom Josh's father, Mr. Duggar, took Josh? Kaylee, the police officer? Lawyer, yes. Kaylee, I don't know his name. Lawyer, it is my understanding that at some point, I don't know if this is the same occasion, Mr. Duggar took Josh to a state trooper named Hutchins. Does that ring a bell at all? Kaylee, I know they took him to a state trooper, but I don't remember his name. Lawyer, were you told what happened or what occurred in that visit between the trooper, Mr. Duggar, and Josh Duggar? Kaylee, Josh did not tell me, and I don't believe Jim Bob told me either. I think it was my dad who told me that the police officer was, well, thank you for coming to us and talking about it, and we trust that you won't ever do it again, and they let him leave, and that's my understanding of how it went. Lawyer, and to your knowledge, did the trooper ever make a report as a mandatory reporter to the Arkansas, hotline? Did he call the hotline? Kaylee, as far as I know, he did not communicate this to anyone else. Lawyer, okay. Did you have the occasion to talk to any of his sisters who would have been victims about what they did afterwards? Kaylee, you mean how they were handled emotionally? Lawyer, sure, yes. Kaylee, I know they had a lot of conversations with their parents. I spoke to them briefly, mostly in a comforting way, not for counseling, just because we were friends, and I was 15 at the time. I don't recall any specific conversations that we had. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not real helpful. Lawyer, that's fine. Do you know if any of them sought help, more professionally with a counselor or a physician? Kaylee, while we were hanging out with them, they did not. Lawyer, okay. Since then, have you had the occasion to discuss with any of them what they have done to work through their feelings or to deal with the trauma? Kaylee, I have talked to Jill. Lawyer, and can you recall her ever telling you that she sought help, professional help? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, she did? Kaylee, yes. I believe it was after they were married, her and Derek. Lawyer, oh, she did? Kaylee, uh-huh. Lawyer, have you ever talked to any of the sisters about anything else, any of the other sisters? Kaylee, no, I have lost contact with Ginger and Joy. Lawyer, okay. Kaylee, and Jana. Lawyer, after you put the betrothal on hold, did your families continue to have the same kind of relationship they had prior? Kaylee, no. Lawyer, okay. Can you describe what happened to the relationship between the families? Kaylee: I'm trying to figure out a good way to say it without giving you a lot of the story. Well, simply put, after what happened with Josh, there was a lot of distrust between our families and our communication with each other. We still went to the same church gathering, family gatherings, whatever you want to call it, and we did for several years, but the relationship was always strained. It never went back to where it was before. Lawyer: Do you recall any of the gatherings, this incident, or the incident being discussed, brought up in any way at a gathering? Kaylee: Not amongst the children. I do know that the fathers got together and talked about it, but the children didn't talk about it. Lawyer: Do you recall Josh ever going forward or coming forward to, if not the children, to the other attendees of the gathering, the parents? Kaylee: I do. I know that he did attend some of those meetings, yes. And so here I think Kaylee's talking about Josh standing up in church and talking about what he did. Lawyer: Did he tell you about those, or did your dad tell you about those? Kaylee: I know he told me some of them. I'm trying to remember some things because I know, timeline of events, but I can't remember for sure who told me what when it came to Josh or my dad, because there were times that Josh would tell me things. Lawyer: Okay, you are pretty darn good with dates. Kaylee: I think it was because I was romantically involved that you remember these kinds of things. Kaylee: He went away for a few months, March, I think, 31st or something, whichever it was that year, I don't remember. It was April 1st, or if it was March, whichever one of those days, it was because I found out about it on March 30th. And he said it happened that same night or the night before, something like that. And there was a day or two where my family was traveling, and they ended up telling me very soon after the incident had happened. And then Josh left and he went out of town. Jim Bob took him to a facility in Little Rock, and he wanted him to come back for his birthday on July 18th. So we drove down and got him and brought him back, and that's how I remember those days. Lawyer: So the times that Josh would go to speak with the older people, the parents at least, at these gatherings, was that before he went to Little Rock until July 18th, or was that July 18th after he came back? Kaylee: It was after. As far as I know, my dad is the only person that knew. Well, there was one other family that knew during that time that he was away. Lawyer: That he was in Little Rock? Kaylee: Right. And so here the lawyer is trying to get at, who knew what was going on with Josh? Because this is part of what's going on in Jill and Jess's case, is that the city of Springfield is saying a lot of people knew about what happened with Josh. So it was kind of common knowledge. Everyone was talking about it. And so even though they released the official reports, it's not even like they outed the family. That's what Springdale is claiming, because they're saying, look, eventually this was going to get out. A lot of people in the Duggars community knew about this. It was hush-hush, but it was being talked about, and many people knew about it. And so that's why it's so pertinent to the case. So then the lawyer goes on to ask, and who was the other family that knew about what happened with Josh? And Kaylee says, the Butcher family. Lawyer: Now, there's been some testimony that the Duggar family visited Josh on at least one occasion, perhaps more than one occasion, in Little Rock. They would travel together to Little Rock to visit Josh. Did you ever go on any of those visits? Kaylee: I did not. I waited to see him until he came back. Lawyer: Did your brothers and sisters ever go to any of those visits? Kaylee: No. Lawyer: And do you know if any of the other families that you mentioned, did they all go? Did any of them visit that you are aware of? Kaylee: No, not that I'm aware of. It was pretty quiet at the time when Josh went away. Lawyer: Was there a time when it became more known amongst the people at the gathering? And when they say gathering, they're talking about the Duggars church. Kaylee: Yes. Lawyer: And why is that? What was the difference at the time after he came back from Little Rock? Kaylee: I think they tried to establish communication with other men that they trusted to help him to work through those issues. I cannot recall at the time how many there were. It was still a smaller group of people at that time. I know that he talked to Perry Butcher and my dad and Jim Bob, but I don't remember who else knew about it at that time. Lawyer, when Josh did describe for you what was happening when he would meet with the older people, the parents, what did he describe? Kaylee, that they got on to him, they gave him wise advice, that they encouraged him to be a better man, and that he would confess his transgressions with them. Lawyer, were you ever aware that Josh was compelled to cut his hair after he had confessed to them? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, was that something that was done at one of the gatherings, or was that done with just the older people with him? Kaylee, I believe it was done privately, actually. I think he was alone. Lawyer, oh, okay. And was that after he came back in July of 2003? Kaylee, that was a different year entirely. Like I said, it was quiet for probably 2 years, and then they got turned into DHS from the Oprah Winfrey show, I believe, and then it became far more well-known at that point. But I think that may have been in 2006 or 2005 when Josh shaved his head. I didn't go over those dates, so I can't give you a specific one. Lawyer, were you still as in close touch with any of the Duggars or Josh at that time in 2005 or 2006 when he shaved his head? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay, were you mostly more in touch with Jill or Joy, or were there others in the family? Kaylee, no, I was actually more in touch with Jim Bob and Michelle at that time. We were still in family gatherings with them, but I haven't had as close of contact with the girls at that time until more recently as we've become adults. We were friends as kids, but we didn't actually talk to each other about things that had happened when we were children, not specifics or details. I talked far more with Jim Bob and Michelle than the girls. Lawyer, what was the nature of that relationship? Was it family friends, or were they counseling you, or was that, could you describe that relationship between you, Jim Bob, and Michelle, let's say after July of 2003? Kaylee, I had expected to marry their son, and they had expected me to be their daughter-in-law. And this was a lot of heartache that happened for me when I was especially that young. So I think that we had a lot of conversations, mostly to see how I was doing and to see how Josh was doing. And so I guess still kind of like in-law relationship in a way. But we just cared about each other, friends as well as that, parental-daughter relationship. Lawyer, how old were you in July of 2003? Kaylee, I was 15. Lawyer, okay, is it fair to say that there was still some hope amongst Jim Bob and Michelle that the betrothal would be able to continue and y'all would be able to get married? Kaylee, at the time, yes. Lawyer, you had a time in your mind when that issue was closed for you, in your mind and theirs as well? Kaylee, I'm not sure about them. I came to that conclusion much sooner. I believe I was 17, maybe 18, and I had just enough of the issues that were happening, and Josh made a comment to me about that, made me feel like he took advantage of my feelings for him, and it made me aware that I felt really used emotionally, and I was just done. But I do recall that, and I think I just shut myself off emotionally to them after that. I just kind of knew that it was never going to happen, and I didn't want it to happen anymore. So yeah. Lawyer, Mrs. Tull, you mentioned that there was an incident. Was there a thing that sort of brought that understanding that you had came to, or was there a conversation that you had with Josh? Kaylee, there was something that happened. Lawyer, and may I ask? Kaylee, Josh was still looking at P and was lying about it, and it was more the lies that I was done with. I understand it, people look at P and people are okay with doing that. But for us in our relationship, it wasn't, and I was not okay with being lied to about it. And I think that I couldn't trust him anymore, and that I also felt taken advantage of. The combination of that made me feel like it was just resolved in my heart. Lawyer, I'm assuming you were still living at home at this time? Kaylee, my whole family was actually living in Little Rock at this time. Lawyer, okay, but you stayed in Northwest Arkansas? Kaylee, no, actually Josh was there with us. Lawyer, in Little Rock? Kaylee, yes. Okay guys, I'm gonna have to pick up with the rest of this on a second video only because I live in Malaysia. It takes a long time to upload these videos, but I am finding this quite interesting. This is the incident that we weren't sure about. Those of you that have followed this channel and those who follow Duggar Snark and some other Duggar pages, we still hadn't gotten any confirmation of what had happened in Little Rock that made the Holts decide to not keep Josh at their home any longer because he was living with them. They were trying to give him a second chance with Kaylee, and it sounds like we had kind of always thought maybe it had something to do with looking at pee, and Kaylee seems to confirm that here. I will go ahead and end this video now and then move forward with part 2. I do feel terrible for Kaylee that she has to sit for this deposition. It must be so difficult having gone through this with Josh. I'm glad to hear from everything I've read the Holts have moved away more so from the IBLP and that Kaylee lives somewhat of a life with a little bit more freedom. I'll see you guys for part 2.